Hello and welcome back to Critical Rocket. If you've watched my previous playthrough of the US forces in the recently released Western Front Armies DLC for Company of Heroes 2, this is from the other side, the Axis side, OberKommandoWest. Just having a quick look at the different doctrines available there. We've got the Luftwaffe Ground Doctrine, we've got the Breakthrough Doctrine, and we've got the Propaganda Doctrine basically, which is all about manipulating the field, causing troops to have debuffs and being able to call in things like command tanks. Luftwaffe Ground Doctrine is, well, pretty much what it says. It's airborne forces that aren't airborne. They get call-ins such as Fallschirmjäger infantry, which are very powerful. They can build, well, they can't, but your Sturm Pioneers, they'll be able to build AA turrets around the map, which act as just as effectively against ground forces, and a few extra bits and pieces. You'll be able to call in U-87 Stukas to attack enemy points and drop Fallschirmjäger down on the location, and one or two other things like that. Breakthrough Doctrine is more of your classic Blitzkrieg style, focusing on bringing in big armor and extra Panzer Grenadiers to the field to ruin the day of the Allies, basically. But yeah, what's the big difference here with the OberKommandoWest compared to the Wehrmacht of Company of Heroes 2 Vanilla and of the original Company of Heroes? Well, you may have seen the large command vehicles, which may bring back memories of anyone who's played the original Opposing Fronts expansion of the British Army, which itself used command trucks. And I think they've taken a page out of that sort of playbook and gone with the idea of having the OberKommandoWest being a force that's more mobile, to play in with the sort of Blitzkrieg theme of the army. So, unlike the British ones where you could set them up and then have them controlling an area and then you could move them to another location at the risk of the truck being attacked on the move, the OKW versions, once they're set up, that's it. So they still have the effect of locking down a territory point and generating bonus resources, and obviously accessing new units for you. But they pretty much are stationary after that and have no real defences. One of their buildings does have a cannon on top, which is effective against light vehicles, and pretty good at suppressing infantry, but that's it. So you have to be very mindful of where you put these vehicles, or they're going to get toasted within a very short space of time. But yeah, outside of that, the units are pretty much what you've come to expect now from the German Army and Company of Heroes. They're a mixture of sort of real German Army units and a few fantasy ones. Things like Panzer Fusiliers, which I don't think I've ever heard of before, but they're basically just another form of elite infantry, rifle-armed infantry. You have Sturm Pioneers here instead of regular Pioneers. Sturm Pioneers are armed with SDG 44 rifles and are actually a lot tougher. They're probably the toughest of any of the construction units in the game, essentially because they don't build any base buildings. They just they can repair vehicles and they can build defensive structures like sandbags and, as you can see before, barbed wire, and depending on your doctrine, other buildings. But they won't be building anything expressly base-like. So they're actually quite a viable early game unit. They're relatively difficult to kill, they've got good damage and good range. Other units are more traditional things. You've got Volksgrenadiers, which are armed with K98s, and they can upgrade to having Panzerfaust or Panzerschrecks at a later date once you've got the munitions. You've got Sturm Officers or Sturm Offiziers, who obviously grant bonuses to units around them, and they can also have other call-in abilities like smoke and like light artillery barrages. It's business as usual, really, for the infantry of Oberkommando Wehrmacht, or West, sorry. Ignore that gaff. But the big selling point of this force is the armour. it's the tanks. Anyone who reads about World War II will know about the things such as the King Tiger and the Jagdtiger or Jagdtiger, which are basically German super heavy tanks, and you've also got the Sturmtiger as well. Basically, these are monsters of the battlefield of their day. They were, notoriously hard to knock out, had very powerful weapons, and were not the kind of thing infantry or vehicles would ever or armor would ever really want to go up against in reality. Incredibly deadly tanks, and that's what OKW have access to. The King Tiger is a standard unit. Once you've got all of the base buildings set up, you will have access to the King Tiger. Obviously, it costs a fortune in manpower and other resources, but once it's on the field, you've got basically a near indestructible tank. I mean, I say near indestructible. I mean, it goes up one-on-one against other tanks. It will obliterate them. It takes several tanks to really wear it down quickly. I believe Breakthrough Doctrine has the Jagdtiger, which is basically a gigantic German AT sort of tank destroyer available to them. Well, both of them are very, very hardy, very difficult to knock out, and will probably swing a match for you once you've got them, at least online, competitively. They're very hard to counter. Yeah, they're kind of a weird mix. There's again a heavy emphasis on SDKFC half-tracks of various builds. You've got Walking Stuka, which has improved dramatically since the original game. The Stuka rounds, all the rockets are very, very powerful now. You've got the infrared half-track, which basically reveals a section of the map for you and allows you to bring in rockets or artillery or airstrikes or whatever you've got. You've got the Puma armoured car, which was seen a bit earlier in Company of Heroes 2 when they added that as part of a free Doctrine update, as a kind of teaser for two of the new units. The Soviets obviously got the M4 Lend-Lease Doctrine Sherman. Yeah. That kind of makes that the armour that they're able to call in include vehicles such as the Jagdpanzer IV, which is the standard tank destroyer vehicle. Late game, you can have access to a Panther. You can get your light tank in this one is a Panzer II, a Luftpanzer with its 20mm quickfire cannon, which is pretty cool. They all look very good in this game. I believe I might get one later on in this match. Zoomed in here that those were Panzer Fusiliers who are armed with K98s and can upgrade to Gewehr 43 rifles. Basically, they're like the Pathfinders equivalent on the US team. Very good at long range, but if anything gets close to them, they get killed very quickly. But they're not so much a suppressing force. They're very good at laying down fire and causing DPS over time. But I think compared to the US forces, who are wholly new, per se, theoretically, in as much as Company of Heroes 2, the Allies are always more interesting because the Allied nations had their own equipment and their own sort of doctrines and tactics and stuff, so, the Soviet tanks and the equipment was different, the British equipment, tanks, and the US equipment. Whereas the Germans are more of a constant, and I think Relic are kind of struggling at this point to have. I mean, how many have they got now? This would be the 4th German army in Company of Heroes, and really keeping that kind of freshness to an already rather played out force. I think they're kind of struggling with, because there are only so many variants of panzer tanks that you can bring. There's only so many variants of half-tracks you can bring. There's only so many infantry types you can bring in before you start pushing. I mean, this game already pushes realism, obviously, and historical accuracy to a point. So once you start really scraping the barrel and outside of just making up infantry units, you're going to be in a real tough position to come up with something that's genuinely new and fresh for the Germans. I think I think this force is fine. They have this interesting mix of super heavy state-of-the-art vehicles in this one, mixed with a few older weapons. You can see the artillery piece firing as an IG-18 infantry gun, which is very early war artillery piece. And then you've got the Raketwerfer, which is sort of basically it's a tube with a gun shield and some wheels, and they just load a rocket in and fire it, and that's it. So yeah, you'll be looking at stuff like that. They're a weird mix of elite infantry and tanks and sort of scraped together equipment. I guess you could argue it's very, very similar to what the Panzer Lair was supposed to be. This is basically this game's Panzer Lair, without calling them that. Still though, they are a fun force to play around with. You see the little animations here, the fire, boom. The work they've done is great. Again, the uniforms are a lot better than they were in the originals. You know, the Grenadiers aren't wearing weird grey overalls as if they've been working in a factory. They're actually wearing stuff that's a little more, you know, fitting of the units that they were part of. You know, Panzer crew actually have, you know, the pink markings on their uniforms to show that they were part of the Panzer Corps. It just overall feels a lot better as an effort goes compared to the original game. So yeah, there's lots of the new explosion effects they've added recently. I don't remember this being in the base game, but now you can brew up vehicles as well. I didn't mention this in the US playthrough, but if you hit a tank at the right angle, you'll get a critical basically on the ammunition stowage, and you'll just see a gout of fire coming out of the hatch, which rather grimly means the crew basically just being burnt to death inside the vehicle. But as far as the sort of gameplay aesthetic thing goes, it's a rather impressive graphical effect that they've got on there. Yeah. Oh, there's a big part of veterancy. Generally, it's 3 stars in Company Heroes 2. Denotes your current level of unit skill. OberKommandoWest have 5 stars, which basically means the idea is supposed to be that they're these elite infantry. These are units who had been fighting for however long on the Eastern Front, have been rotated out, and it's supposed to be sort of a nod to the idea that the Western Front was nicknamed the bread and butter front because it was easier to fight the Allies on the west than it was to fight the Russians on the east. So these German units are supposed to be like super elite, so they go up an extra 2 veterancy levels, which get some other bonus abilities. They can move quicker, or they'll do more damage, or they can suppress quicker, or some of them, I think, one unit may even gain extra members, make the unit bigger. There's a whole list. It's quite impressive what some of the units can achieve. It also plays into the idea that the German army is more quality over quantity, whereas obviously the obvious difference with the US and the Russians is quantity over quality. So that's why you need multiple Sherman tanks to take out a single sort of German heavy, because the US forces or the Russian forces lack the sort of equipment capable in large numbers to knock them out one-on-one. Oh, again, an example of the AI there. Just sent a little pioneer over to repair my Jagdpanzer 4, which got rather badly damaged. This is on this map as one of the rather unfortunately small offerings of maps, but this is Lien Forest. Probably pronounced that wrong, it could be Lawn Forest for all I know. It's another 6 to 8 player map, and you've got one side which you've seen a lot of. You'll see a bit of the forest later on. But this side is sort of the outskirts of a town or village, so you know you've got the sort of nice little sort of farm area and the busier streets as you go further in. And over on the right hand side of the map you've got the dense forest areas, which is more claustrophobic. There's less manoeuvrability for vehicles outside of larger ones that can just knock trees over, and the infantry are forced funnel through certain channels. There's also a river running through there, so it slows down the movement, makes them more vulnerable to damage. And that can become a real nightmare zone to try and defend or to attack, depending on how the battle's going. Here you go, a bit of the forest here. It's probably my favourite map of the set, to be honest, because it's quite a nice mix how it goes from one to the other. What I'm using here is the Walking Stuka, new and improved. We can see a bunch of US forces laid out there. Just got to get it lined up. So you click once and you click again once you've set the position. And here it is. And this is a great look at that. The smoke plumes, the particle effects are gorgeous, and then boom! I do not remember it being that cool and that effective in the original Company of Heroes. That is a major step up from what it used to be. But yeah, if you're a competitive player who really only likes playing as the Allies, I would just recommend getting the US forces on their own. If you're a bit more completionist, you want to feel like you've got a full product, this isn't bad. I'm not saying that the OberKommandoWest are terrible. Oh, there's a tank brewing up there. You can see the flame gout pouring out there. That's just a random critical hit, as I said. But yeah, OberKommandoWest are a fun force. They're still a challenging one. I think they need a bit more micromanagement compared, because their units are generally more expensive, but they have obviously the benefit that they're much more effective in the long term because of their higher veterancy levels. Makes them far more dangerous compared. It's getting them up, and you have to sort of nurse them carefully along to make sure that they don't get wiped out. Because obviously the overwhelming numbers of firepower will easily take out any infantry, especially mid to late game when you've got tanks rolling around the place. But yeah, again, it's the quality over quantity sort of philosophy with them. You have to keep that in mind. You can't just throw the infantry away into battles. You really do have to micromanage. If the game tells you someone's under attack, you have to go check it, because otherwise you're risking losing quite a lot of invested manpower. But part 2 is coming up. This video is nearly finished. This one's only going to be in 2 parts, mainly because the map was a bit shorter. Although it's still 4 on 3, I'm on the team with 4 against all expert AIs. It just seems to be how the map was gone. As you can see, it really kept them bottlenecked the whole time. It wasn't as fun as I was hoping it was going to be. Previous matches was really good, but yeah, anything I've missed I'll discuss in part 2 next. So thanks for watching. Have a good week.